Moving to Japan now, where around 310,000 chickens and ducks have been culled at a farm on the coast of the Sea of Japan. It comes after a highly pathogenic strain of H5 avian influenza was detected in 5 birds in Niigata and Aomori. Workers dug trenches and buried the slaughtered birds to contain the spread of the virus. The Environment Ministry is sending investigation experts to the affected areas and has issued the highest caution warning in the country.
At least one man is dead after an earthquake rattles Nepal, triggering an avalanche near Mount Everest. It happened early Monday, November 28th. According to Nepal's National Seismology Center, the epicenter of the 5.4 magnitude quake was about 75 miles east of Kathmandu, but the early morning shaking was strong enough to send people in the capital city out of their homes. A Sherpa guide and a British climber on Mount Amadablam near Everest were reportedly hit by ice rolling down the slopes. The 43-year-old guide died on the way back to base camp, while the British climber was taken to a hospital in Kathmandu for minor injuries. Nepal is still reeling from a 7.8 magnitude quake that killed nearly 9,000 people in April last year. According to the National Seismological Center, Monday's tremor was one of nearly 500 aftershocks Nepal has experienced since then.
Australia's Great Barrier Reef has suffered its worst year on record. Scientists say global warming has caused the most extreme loss of coral ever seen on the reef, a World Heritage Site. Terry Hughes, the director of Australia's Coral Reef Research Centre, says the North has borne the brunt of it.
Well, the good news we found from our new map is that there's very low levels of loss of corals in the central and southern section of the Great Barrier Reef. The bad news comes from the north of Port Douglas all the way up to Papua New Guinea, where about 2/3 of the corals have died in the last 7 months.
Bleaching like this occurs when the water is too warm and coral is forced to expel living algae. This causes the coral to calcify and turn white. Hughes expects it will take 10 to 15 years for the coral to regrow, but this is assuming the sea doesn't get any warmer.
It's being described as a hellish scene by those who managed to escape the deadly Tennessee wildfire zone near Gatlinburg. According to CBS News Online, the fire is the largest to hit the state in nearly a century, killing 3 people and destroying hundreds of homes and other buildings. 14 others were hurt, and the city is currently under curfew. Hurricane-force winds aided in increasing the fire intensity. 14,000 people were said to have been evacuated. Parts of Gatlinburg now look like a scorched ghost town.
Dramatic scenes out of Tennessee as wildfires tear through the resort towns of Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, destroying hundreds of structures and forcing thousands to evacuate. Authorities say a wildfire that started in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park quickly spread into nearby communities on Monday, November 28th. A crippling drought and strong winds were credited with fueling the flames. According to National Weather Service meteorologist Sam Roberts, a little more than half an inch of rain fell overnight, which, quote, significantly reduced the fires, but a lot of damage was already done in the popular tourist area. The Sevier County Emergency Management Agency said Black Bear Falls possibly lost all of its cabins, while the Westgate Resorts, which has more than 100 buildings, was destroyed.
According to the Bismarck Tribune, there's a new threat coming from the local sheriff's office that anyone delivering supplies to the protesters could face fines of up to $1,000. Despite the fact that the governor of North Dakota has ordered a mandatory evacuation, thousands continue to gather at the site of the protest, saying they will not leave until the state calls off the controversial project to carry oil through 4 states from North Dakota to Illinois. The weather in the area has dropped below freezing with a wind chill of 13 degrees.
ISIS is taking credit for an attack at Ohio State University, calling the attacker a soldier of the Islamic State. Donald Trump has tweeted in response saying, quote, ISIS is taking credit for the terrible stabbing attack at Ohio State University by a Somali refugee who should not have been in our country. The attacker had stated the U.S. should make peace with the Islamic State. Meanwhile, new reports the attacker's family received aid when they moved to the U.S. from Pakistan in 2014.
We preached patience but could not endure in the end and had to enter Syria together with the Free Syrian Army. Why did we enter? We do not have an eye on Syrian soil. The issue is to provide land to their real owners. This is to say we are there for the establishment of justice. We entered Syria to end the rule of the tyrant al-Assad who terrorizes with a state of terror.
During a speech in Istanbul, Erdogan added that Turkey did not enter Syria for any other reason. Turkish troops and tanks rolled into Syria on August the 24th with the stated goal of fighting Daesh and Kurdish militants. Damascus has described Ankara's military deployment as an invasion. Syria also accuses Turkey of supporting terrorist group in Syria and turning a blind eye to terrorists crossing the border.
Well, Syria says that Israeli warplanes have launched an airstrike on the outskirts of the capital, Damascus. A Syrian military source says Israeli jets fired 2 missiles into Syria after breaching the Lebanese airspace. The missiles landed in the Sabura area west of Damascus. No casualties were reported in the attack that was conducted at dawn. The same source described the strike as an attempt to lift the spirits of militant groups. Following the Syrian army's recent successes, Israel has in several cases conducted attacks against the Syrian soil, mainly in the Golan Heights region. Damascus accuses Tel Aviv of backing militants fighting against the Syrian government and says that the sporadic attacks are in line with Tel Aviv's policy. Well, a group representing Rohingya Muslims in Europe accuses Myanmar's army of manipulating the Rohingya into carrying out an attack on a border outpost to legitimize the ongoing crackdown on the community. The chairman of the European Rohingya Council said Myanmar's military had prior knowledge of the attack and made it a pretext to carry out the bloody operation in Rakhine State. Khairul Amin said the use of gunships and arson attacks against Rohingya villages suggested that the army wanted to wipe them out. Nearly 100 people have been killed and over 1,000 Muslim homes, mosques and schools have been razed in the subsequent military clampdown. The state-sponsored violence has forced thousands to flee, with many fleeing the harrowing tale, telling the harrowing tale of rape and torture by Myanmar's army. A senior UN official has already accused Myanmar of carrying out ethnic cleansing of the Muslim minority.
As millions of people lined up to shop on Black Friday, others decided to spend their money on digging a giant hole. Yes, a giant hole. It was the latest Black Friday stunt from Cards Against Humanity, which is also known as a party game for horrible people. People from around the world chipped in money to keep the digging going, and they were generous. They contributed over $100,000, which was enough to make the dig last until Sunday afternoon. In return, they got a bigger hole, because as the website dedicated to the hole said, what else are you gonna buy? An iPod? Last year, the company called on its customers to pay $5 for absolutely nothing. The company raised over $71,000, which team members spent mostly on themselves, though they did donate some money to charity. If you're wondering why the company decided to dig a hole this year instead of donating to charity, its answer is this: why aren't you giving all this money to charity? It's your money.
The number of those in need of aid accounts to nearly half of the country's population. The UN coordinator for CAR says humanitarian efforts are critical to save lives there. The UN estimates that some $400 million are required to fund the CAR's humanitarian needs for the next year. The impoverished nation has been plagued by bloody ethnic conflict since 2013. A fresh wave of violence erupted between rival armed groups last week that killed at least 85 people in the town of Bria. The clashes also forced some 11,000 civilians out of their homes.
A former Boko Haram headquarters gutted by battle. This was once a busy commercial bank, but the insurgents took it over when they overran this town called Dikwa back in 2014. The Nigerian military is back in control here, but as Boko Haram fighters fled, they destroyed much of the town's infrastructure. Downed telephone masts, lethal reminders of just how cut off residents here are. Humanitarian assistance is slowly getting into Dikwa. It's urgently needed.
So this child is severely malnourished. You've seen that the prominent ribs, okay, and you can see that the child is weak.
UNICEF estimates that 400,000 children in northeastern Nigeria will suffer severe acute malnutrition this year. Without treatment, approximately 1 in 5 of those children, more than 75,000, is likely to die. But where it's safe enough for aid to get in, improvements can quickly be seen.
Go ahead. When we came in April, when this area was newly opened up, we were seeing severe acute malnutrition rates of about 15%. That was really, really bad. And through our intervention, things have really improved.
For now, the immediate priority is saving the lives of families and children affected by issues such as malnutrition here in the northeast. But the longer this conflict continues, the greater the risk of a lost generation of children who've grown up separated from their families, away from home, and unable to access basic services like education.
Welcome to Dadaab, the world's largest refugee camp.
And they live in these camps, which are essentially makeshift camps.
Dome-like huts made from sticks and plastic sheeting dot the arid landscape. The climate is brutal, hot all year, with hardly a drop of rain. American aid worker Christopher Hoffman works in Dadaab.
The food, the education, the hospitalization, the medical care, everything, the water, the toilets, everything is provided to you.
Ibrahim was 20 years old when war disrupted life as he knew it.
We were forced to flee from Somalia across the border into Kenya, and this is where we ended up.
He hoped his stay here would be short-lived, a temporary place to wait out the violence. That never happened. Now, 25 years later, with 17 children, 4 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, Ibrahim, like so many others here, has witnessed multiple generations of families growing up in Dadaab.
When the camp opened back in 1992, it was only supposed to hold about 90,000 people. Well, today, nearly 25 years later, more than 340,000 refugees call this place home.
The majority of them Somalis fleeing civil war.
They've lost their homes, they've lost their families and their communities.
Teresa Angaro is with an UN agency that oversees operations in Dadaab. Her group, in partnership with other aid agencies, provides refugees with food, water, healthcare, and education. For all the difficulties, Angaro says,
this is the safest place that the refugees can go to, and the place that they have now, that they now call home.
But that's about to change. The Kenyan government wants to close the camp and send Somali refugees like Muhammad, who runs an ice-making factory in the camp, back to their war-torn homeland. As you can imagine, he's nervous about returning. Somalia is still in the middle of an Islamic insurgency that hasn't recovered from decades of conflict.
Nothing has changed there. It is still a dangerous place.
Authorities want to shut the place down because they believe it's a center for recruiting Islamic terrorists.
Kenya government has expressed concerns about security, mostly terrorism, following various attacks in the country.
So the repatriation is underway. During our visit, CBN News filmed chaotic scenes as authorities tried to fingerprint hundreds of refugees.
This repatriation operation is causing us so much stress. I escaped here with my children. Some of them got lost on the way here. I don't know where they are. Just when I thought I was safe, now the government wants me to leave.
Moving to Japan now, where around 310,000 chickens and ducks have been culled at a farm on the coast of the Sea of Japan. It comes after a highly pathogenic strain of H5 avian influenza was detected in 5 birds in Niigata and Aomori. Workers dug trenches and buried the slaughtered birds to contain the spread of the virus. The Environment Ministry is sending investigation experts to the affected areas and has issued the highest caution warning in the country.
At least one man is dead after an earthquake rattles Nepal, triggering an avalanche near Mount Everest. It happened early Monday, November 28th. According to Nepal's National Seismology Center, the epicenter of the 5.4 magnitude quake was about 75 miles east of Kathmandu, but the early morning shaking was strong enough to send people in the capital city out of their homes. A Sherpa guide and a British climber on Mount Amadablam near Everest were reportedly hit by ice rolling down the slopes. The 43-year-old guide died on the way back to base camp, while the British climber was taken to a hospital in Kathmandu for minor injuries. Nepal is still reeling from a 7.8 magnitude